In today's lesson, we're going to solve quadratic equations, and for the most part, everything in today's lesson is a review of last year. The only thing is when we use quadratic formula, if it asks for the exact values, then we don't put it in our calculator and come up with any decimals. We leave the radical signs in our solution. The very first thing we do when we want to solve an equation, though, is we first look to see if we can factor. And being that this is a trinomial, it's nice and easy. We need two numbers that multiply to be negative 12 and add to be negative 1. So our magic numbers are negative 4 and positive 3. And I'm just going to fix, I don't want that equal sign there because actually I need my equal sign at the end because we're making all of this equal to 0. So what our answer is here is that x can be positive 4 or x can be negative 3. Either of these x values make your left side and your right side equal to each other at a value of 0. So if I just can show you real quick here, sort of like a check, if I was to substitute 4 into this equation after it had been factored, it's going to equal 0 because this here equals 0 and anything times 0 is 0. So your left side equals your right. So essentially it's like taking the opposite sign of what's in there for these examples here. When you have an example in like B where everything's not on the same side of the equals, we need to do that. We need to make it equal to 0. So I'm going to bring that x over, it changes signs, don't forget. And I bring the 3 over and it changes signs as well. When I gather like terms, I get 3x squared minus 5x minus 4. The first thing you'd probably want to do here is check for decomposition, but I know that it doesn't work, so we're going to go right into our quadratic formula. And hopefully from last year you remember that the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. 4ac all over 2a. So from this example here, we have an a value of 3, a b value of negative 5, and a c value of negative 4. So be very careful when you substitute in. So when I substitute in, that negative is there with the b, but I'm also putting in a negative 5. So show your work there so that you remember those two negatives become a positive. And I have plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 4. And the square root covers all of that, so it's good to show your work properly. All over 2 times 3. So when you start to simplify this, you have plus or minus 25 plus 48. All over 6. Make some room there. So we can start to simplify. So we have 5 plus or minus 73 over 6. So at this point, if we wanted exact values, there's nothing else we can do but rewrite our x values, because we can't simplify that 73 any further. If it's not asking for an exact value, then it's okay to put it in your calculator and round and come up with a rough number that's approximate. And there you have it, your two solutions that would make zeros. Here's our last example for today. We don't have too many examples because this was a large part of your grade 10. So hopefully, for many of you, this is just a review. So I see here that it's looking for exact roots, so no matter what, I don't have a choice. I need to be sure if I put into the quadratic formula that I don't do any rounding at all. So of course, the first thing I check for is to see whether I can do any decomposition. So I'll show that work this time, 4x minus 1. So remember with decomposition, you do a times c, that equals negative 4. 4 times negative 1, and my b value is negative 4. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be negative 4 and add to be negative 4 as well. So quickly it looks like negative 2 times negative 2 might work, because those add to be negative 4. But they multiply to give you a positive, so this doesn't work. So there aren't any numbers, and therefore we can't factor. So let's get rid of all of this, because it's not going to be of any use to us now. When you realize that you can't factor, then you immediately are showing your quadratic formula. And it's important to show the formula every time so that you get used to writing it, you're organized, and you also have it memorized by final exam. Now we can substitute in negative and negative 4 plus or minus negative 4 squared is 4 times 4 times negative 1. And 2 times 4. Now keep in mind, our whole purpose here, what we're still doing is we're looking for x values that will make this equation equal to 0. So we're looking for those roots for those zeros. So we don't want to lose sight of what we're doing there. So we have 8 plus or minus 32 all over 8. So I'm just going to continue my work up here so that we can see it all in one view. So what this means is my first x-intercept happens at 8 plus the square root of 32 all over 8. So we'll finish, and then our second intercept, I'll just put it down here, we'll come back to x minus the square root of 32. So what I first want to do is see whether I can simplify that 32, and I can. So I'm going to have x plus, remember that if I have 16 times 2, I can square root that 16 all over 8. So I'm left with 8 plus 4 square root of 2 all over 8. That 8 goes with both. It's over 8 over 8 and 4 square root of 2 over 8. So I'm just going to have a final step here of 1 plus the square root of 2 all over 2. And I'll show you just that last little bit. Keep in mind this reduces to be 1/2. That's where this 2 came from. So I had 1 over 2 because I reduced that to be 1/2. So now we'll simplify our second 0. We have 8 divided by 8 equals 1. And then we will simplify the same way, but this is subtraction this time. So we have 16 times 2 all over 8, which will give us the exact same answer there. Our two answers that make both the equation equal 0 on both sides. So I've just put one equation here for you to try tomorrow. 30 equals negative 5t squared. Let me just fix this here. Those shouldn't be all equals. Make it addition and addition. So at the beginning of class tomorrow, I'd like to see your work for coming up with the zeros, the solutions of 30 equals negative 5t squared plus 30t plus 10t.